Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the July 29th meeting of the Charter Revision Commission. We're here this evening to hear from the Common Council, certain members of the Common Council who've joined us tonight so that we can discuss recommendations that have come from that portion of the process. We'll do a quick roll call here in person. We have Jim Clark, Carl Dickens, Tyler Fairbairn, Rick McQuaid, and John Levin. Online, Doug Hempstead and Ed Camacho. So we have a quorum. We'll kick off with the public participation portion this evening. I don't have the list in front of me. I don't know that there were some. There were some, for sure. We can also check to see if we have anyone online. We can go back again. Thank you. First up is Sharon Creed-Pritchett. Thank you, Sharon.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your work on this very important matter. As Chair of the Board of Education Finance Committee, I want to speak about the importance of thoughtful budgeting and raise some concerns about the proposed accelerated timeline for the city and school district budgets. The budget for Norwalk Public Schools is more than a financial document. It's the result of a fluid and collaborative process that spans several months. Numbers change throughout this process as we receive feedback from school leaders, educators, families, and the community. This flexibility is essential because it allows us to respond to real time needs and to make adjustments that reflect the priorities of our school communities. The Finance Committee remains committed to collaboration and transparency, and we have no objection to working within two separate budget caps or submitting a line item budget before the Common Council's cap setting. However, meeting that earlier deadline would mean shifting our school-based budget process, typically conducted in March and April, to December and January. This shift would require our principals and budget teams to engage in intensive planning during one of the busiest periods of the instructional year. That is also a time when school staff should be fully focused on student learning, classroom routines, and academic support. The current process works because it allows time for input, planning, and the careful use of every available dollar. It also accounts for funding from multiple sources, including city allocations, state funding, and federal grants, many of which are currently under threat. This complexity requires thoughtful analysis and flexibility, which could be lost if the process is rushed. While we are willing to adapt to new expectations, we believe changes to the schedule must be implemented in a way that protects the quality and accuracy of school budgets. Compressing the timeline could lead to hurried decisions and missed opportunities, which in turn could prevent us from investing in the areas that matter most to our students. On behalf of the Finance Committee, I respectfully ask that the city consider a timeline that gives us the space to continue engaging in a full
30 seconds
and
remaining.
responsive budget process. This will help ensure that every dollar is used in the most impactful way, which is for the benefit of Norwalk students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Luna, I'm going to do one of the Zoom, and then we'll come back to you. We will call the top of the list here, Dr. Estrella.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So as the superintendent of Norwalk Public Schools, I'd like to offer some perspective on the proposed timeline for developing the city and Board of Education budgets. While I fully support a collaborative and transparent budgeting process, the proposed timeline would create real challenges for how we carry out the school-based budgeting process in a way that reflects the unique needs of scholars, schools, and staff. To be clear, we have no objection to the city's request for the submission of a line item budget or to the idea of setting budget caps in two phases as the district has done in the past. We understand and respect the importance of detailed financial planning. However, in order to meet those early deadlines, our school-based budgeting process, which typically takes place in March and April, would need to be moved up to December and January. That shift will have meaningful implications. December and January are critical months for instruction, academic monitoring, and student support. It's a time when school leaders and educators are fully focused on teaching and learning. Compressing the budget planning cycle into this period would place added strain on staff and limit the time needed for inclusive, thoughtful planning. Our current budgeting approach is collaborative and school-specific. Central office teams work closely with principals and educators to carefully consider how every dollar is used, especially as we navigate both local funding priorities and uncertainty around key federal grants. Accelerating this work would make it more difficult to engage fully in the process and could lead to rushing decisions that don't make the best use of available resources for our students. We greatly value our partnership with the city and share our commitment to strong fiscal stewardship. We simply ask that the timeline allow for the deep engagement and planning needed to build budgets that support student success. Thank you for your continued support of Norwalk Public Schools. We look forward to working together on a timeline that works well for all of us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Estrella. We'll go with the next in person, which is Lunda Asmani.
Great to see you. Good to see you. Lunda Asmani, 18 Bayberry Lane, Norwalk, and also I serve as the Chief Financial Officer for Norwalk Public Schools. So you'll hear mention of the timeline, and you're probably wondering we're not changing the timeline. So just to give you some context, in how we've interpreted the proposal about the Board of Ed presenting a reconciled budget by the time the council sets the cap, the final cap. So based on the current timeline, if I understood that correctly, that cap is set in March. I think March 21st is the no later than date. So in order for the Board of Ed to bring to the council a reconciled budget, which we do now, but we bring that around May or April, around after we've had the BT conversation. So having to do this by March is the acceleration that we're referring to, because that would require us to have completed the school-based budget process where we meet with all the principals and all the SGCs. Those meetings currently happen during the month of March and April, and this year they continued up until May. And so in May is when we present the reconciled budget that ties the Board of Ed request to the cap that's set by the city and the BET. Requiring the Board of Ed to present a reconciled budget in March would mean that the entirety of the process that we now complete in May, when we present the reconciled budget, would be needed to be completed by March 21st to meet that deadline. And in order for the Board of Ed to review the budget and approve the budget, we would have to present that budget to the Board of Ed for approval on around March 3rd. That is almost 90 days earlier than we would be engaging the schools. And the challenge of doing that work in December, January, and November is that the school year is just beginning. There's a lot of uncertainties that we don't know yet. We eventually figure those things out in March. We don't get health insurance numbers until April in most cases, and therefore it would be a challenge for us if the timeline remains to present a reconciled budget. But we have no objection to presenting a reconciled budget, nor do we object to having two separate caps. The challenge on the Board of Ed side is just the timing of the work, specifically engaging our schools and our SGCs to engage in this process almost 90 days earlier than historically. And so we just want you to be aware that there is a timeline.
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. And that's what those are the concerns we're sharing, but we are okay with presenting a reconciled budget and we're okay with the cap. It's just the timing of when we have to present that by is the challenge for the Board of Ed that we would like the committee to know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. Okay, next up, we have one more attendee online, Sandra.
Hi, the name is actually Diana Carpio, and unfortunately you're on my computer, but I'm going to hand it over to Chairperson Carpio.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Apologies for not having my name up as I'm at the graduation at Brian McMahon High School. But as Chair of Norwalk Board of Education, I want to begin by saying how much we value the partnership between the city and our schools. We all want the same thing, and this is to do what's best for our students. The Board of Education supports transparency and working closely with the city during the budget process. We have no issue with submitting a line item budget earlier or working within 2 separate budget caps. We understand the importance of clear financial planning and have already taken steps in recent years to support that approach. However, making this change would mean our school-based budget planning would have happened earlier than usual. Right now, the planning takes place in March and April. The proposed schedule will move it to December and January. This is a time when principals and school staff are focused on teaching, supporting students, and making sure the school is going well. Asking them to step away from that work to focus on budgeting could make it harder to plan effectively and could distract from learning in our schools. Each year, student leaders and staff work carefully with the district to build budgets that reflect the needs of their school communities. This process takes time and teamwork. It is about more than just money. It is about making our students have the teachers, programs, and resources they need to succeed. If we rush this work, we risk making decisions that may not fully reflect what our schools need. We want to meet the city's needs, and we also want to make sure we protect the quality and fairness of the school budgeting process. On behalf of the board, I respectfully ask you to consider a timeline that gives schools enough time to do this important work without taking educators away from their students. Thank you so much for your time, your support, and your continued partnership with Norwalk Public Schools.
Thanks, Diana. So we have no more signups in person. Is there anybody here from the public who would like to speak during public participation?
Just so you know, for the record, I serve as co-chair of the board, and I should mention that I'm also the chair of the finance committee.
Got it. Thank you, Shep. Last call for anybody online. Okay, so we thank you to everybody who came out to speak this evening. Just as an update on where we are in the process. The purpose of this meeting is to kind of initiate the final round of discussions about the charter revision. The Charter Revision Commission has made its recommendations earlier in the summer to the Common Council, who has in turn last week provided us with an additional 21 points to consider. So we will we'll hear from the council this evening, and then we will discuss how we're going to approach this tomorrow. We're meeting again here at 6 o'clock, and then we have a final charter revision meeting on August 5th. We'll have public participation tomorrow as well for anybody who's interested. And so I will turn it over to the council. I just want to quickly acknowledge for the record, Joe Bennett is here online. Hi, Joe. Thank you for joining us. We'll have you guys go over this list, and then I'll kind of lay out how we can potentially tackle this in the next 2 meetings.
Thank you, Tyler. And thank you to the entire Charter Revision Commission. I want to let you know how much we appreciate and respect the work that you have done over these past 11 months now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through the proposed amendments from the Common Council that were approved at our last meeting. I will do no editorializing as I read them, but I will, however, let you know which items passed by consent, meaning everyone agreed that they felt good about these particular proposals. Other than those that were consent, there were split votes. Some were 8-6, some were 9-5. I'm not going to go through all of those individually, but so I'm going to begin with the first one, which was almost consent. There was one dissenting vote on Article 2, Common Council or Council. Please change the defined term to City Council. Same with Article number 2, Article 2-2C, one dissenting vote for. Please consider the following language to supplement the change to City Council. The change in name of the legislative body of Norwalk from Common Council to City Council shall not affect the validity of any actions, ordinances, or decisions taken by the legislative body under its former name, even if the ordinance has not been amended to reflect the change. All such actions shall remain in full force and effect as actions of the City Council. The next 3 items, 3, 4, and 5, full consent. Article 3, 3-3C, council districts, please retain the current standard of 15 council members. Number 4, Article 3, 3-3D1 and 2, term of office for mayor, town clerk, and common council. Please review with council during conferral phase. I, of course, will recuse myself at that time. 5, Article 3, 3-4A1, council districts, please retain the current standard of 2 council members per district. Item 6, split vote, Article 3, 3-4A2, at-large council members. Add 2 at-large seats with 2 in accordance with the laws pertaining to minority party representation by expanding the body to 17 members effective for the 2029 municipal election. Article 7, split vote, Article 4, 4-7C, compensation fixed by council. Please consider adding a baseline salary for the council in an amount equal to 3% of the mayor's salary, or alternatively, an expense reimbursement for necessary expenses subject to a cap effective for the 2029 municipal election. 8, split vote. 8, split vote, appointment of common council employees. Move 5.5D to the council article and expand to permit the hiring of staff as follows. Appointment of the common council's employees. The council may at any time appoint an assistant clerk who shall provide administrative assistance to the council under the direction of the president, and shall, in the absence or in case of the disability of death of the clerk, perform all the duties of the clerk. All records and acts of the assistant shall have the same validity as the records of the clerk. The council may at any time also appoint by majority vote any additional employees as it finds necessary to effectively conduct the council's business, and the Board of Estimate and Taxation shall appropriate compensation for any such employees as shall be fixed by the council. 9, this was full consent. Article 7, 7-1. Please review language that would require disclosure of applicant names, backgrounds, and credentials for board and commission appointments to the council prior to appointment. The intent of this proposal is to monitor appointments in order to identify qualified, diverse, and representative appointments in an open environment. The provision should be designed to encourage broader participation by our residents in the appointment process. Applicants should have the ability to request in writing to the city clerk non-disclosure of such data, e.g. name, resume, background information, although such data would subsequently be made public when the applicant is nominated by the mayor. Number 10, split vote, Article 7, 7-2A, 2 and 3, appointment, term of office, qualification of political balance of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Please consider requiring a member of the Common Council be appointed to serve either as an additional 8th non-voting member or 7th voting member. Next 3 items, 11, 12, and 13, all were full consent. Article 8, 8-4C2, historical provisions pertaining to the comptroller. Please review historical provisions of the comptroller's office derived from special acts. 12, Article 8, 8-4D4, historical provisions pertaining to the purchasing agent. Please review historical provisions of the purchasing agent derived from the special acts. And 13, Article 7, 8-7B2 and 3, functions of the chief and department heads of the Division of Operations and Public Works. Please review historical provisions of the Division of Operation and Public Works derived from special acts. 14, 15, and 16, all split votes, so I'll read them together. That's Chapter 10, 10-5. Please consider establishing 2 separate limits on total appropriations for the general government and the Board of Education cap provision. 15 is 7 Chapter 7, 10-6AB, please consider requiring the mayor and board to submit line item budget compliant with cap provision. And 16, Chapter 7, 10-6C, please consider requiring the mayor or designee to submit a revised estimated mill rate aligned with cap provision by March 21st. 17 and 18, full consent. Chapter 7, 17 is Chapter 7, 10-6D. Please consider amending the current language in 10-6 as 10-6D to require Board of Estimate hearings and a joint meeting with council on or before April 18th. And 18, Chapter 7, 10-7A, please consider changing the BET submission date to the council from April 1st to April 18th. Number 19, split vote, Chapter 7, 10-7B. Please consider A, granting the council authority to override BET action on the cap provisions by a 2/3 vote, including the ability to adjust line items of the impacted general government provisions. B, including a limitation on council authority not to exceed 1% of the total city-side operating budget as originally proposed by the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Number 20, full consent. Chapter 7, 10-8, please consider changing the final date to May 14th. And number 21, split vote, Chapter 7, 10-8C, please consider prohibiting any BET action to modify the final budget as approved by the council. And so those were the total items that were voted on and moved forward to you for this conferral. And I will take a seat and whatever questions you have.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I would like to go through, we'll see if anybody on the commission has questions about any of these. I will ask that we leave item 4, which is the term of office until the very end, so that Marlene recused herself, as she's indicated. But otherwise, we'll go down the list, we'll leave 4, and if there's any questions, we'll do it. Rick?
Mr. Chairman, that's a good idea too, so I'll also have to recuse myself.
Yes, sir. Okay. Any members of the commission have questions for the council members on item 1? Right, on item 2, which is related. Item 3, Article 3, which is so 3, 5, and 6 are going to be kind of connected. I think some of them appear to be contradictory, but that's going to be, the commission will have to make a decision which way to approach that. Are there any questions about that? Okay.
Yes.
I do have,
Oh,
I'm sorry, Doug, is it you're going to speak?
yeah, I was gonna ask Council President Smith that, can you explain that? Because it is contradictory and I marked it that way, and I figured if you can just, is the intent to answer in the negative of what we were suggested the council take a look at? I talked to Steve earlier in the day, but I'd rather hear it from those who were there. And the number 6 is a one to act on because they are contradictory, and that's why I'm prefer.
Sure. Yeah. Steve can explain. And then
Let me explain. They appear contradictory, but they're not truly contradictory. If you take a look at the first one, retain the current standard of 15, the council was rejecting the proposal to raise the number of council members to 20.
Yeah.
And so their position is retain it at 15. We reject the 20-member council. Item number 5 is to retain the current standard of 2 council members per district. They rejected our proposal, the commission's proposal, for 3. So the answers to those 2 issues that they were rejecting those 2 proposals to the revision to the charter. Item number 6, which looks contradictory but really isn't, is their proposal. Their proposal is that you modify the at-large, which we did not address, the commission did not address the at-large membership, and expand it by 2, so you'd have a 17-member council, and 2 of the seats would be NPR. I think that's the explanation of the confusion.
Right, so I mean, we would have to, I mean, eventually you have to pick one of 3 or 6, right? Because 3 says you have 15 council members, 6 says you have 7.
Either pick 2 of them to keep what we have and reject the third one, or accept the third one and reject the other 2.
So I had one question on 6, and I don't know if it was a typo, but did that add 2 at-large seats with 2 under in accordance? Something missing there, or am I not reading that?
2 members, 2 minimum.
Add 2 at-large seats with 2, is the word supposed to be under?
2 additional members.
2 additional members.
Have 2 at-large seats with 2 additional members.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, article, not article, well, article 6, it's item 7 on the list is the compensation fixed by council. Were there any questions from the council members on that? I'm sorry, Ed, did you have a question on the last one?
No, that was, it was what everyone has been talking about, the apparent contradiction, which is not a contradiction.
Okay. Jim, do you have something on 7?
Well, this is an either or situation, it looks like on 7, so it's either 3% of the mayor's salary or as an expense reimbursement, so we'll need to have a discussion about which of those 2 options seems to be the most appropriate.
Yep.
Doesn't, you know, right?
Okay, any questions? Sorry,
Yep.
Doug?
It's not clear, is that divided equally amongst all, I'm just asking that because it's not indicating who's administering it and how it's divided. Is it divided equal to all existing council members? I'm just trying to see what the thought process was. Do we know?
Yeah, I mean, I believe, Steve, you're gonna need to answer that because it's an either or thing. So if it's an expense, you know, you had talked about how that would be handled versus a flat salary.
So the distinction is this, the council went through, and we discussed this as well, is that if it's strictly compensation, it requires under state law, a referendum every time you raise the amount of the compensation. Now, if you establish a 3% standard in a referendum, then the 3% standard governs and you've met the referendum requirement. So the question on the compensation side is really one more of a political question, is whether or not you think compensation would be problematic in the referendum this November. The other side of the coin is if you are authorizing an expense reimbursement, which is not compensation, doesn't fall within the purview of the state statute, you'd be approving it in a referendum because it's part of a charter revision process. And if you set a cap, and we're silent on the cap, one would suggest that maybe the 3% number would work as a cap as well. You can simply budget that. During the budget season, the mayor and the Board of Estimate, working with the council, can establish what the appropriate cap is for reimbursement. And reimbursement, and my assumption on both sides of this is that there would be equality. Everybody would be entitled to 3% on the compensation, and everybody would be subject to the same cap on the reimbursement. There was no discussion about differentials. You know, in other towns, we've gone through this, have differentials between the leadership and other members, but that was not discussed. I think that the council was looking at it across the board, equitable distribution of either compensation or reimbursement.
I asked that because it would certainly have to be injected into the language to make sure the equity happens.
Yeah, and so Doug, I think whatever we decide, in the next 2 meetings on any of this stuff, Steve will be writing it up. So we can discuss how we want to approach any of it, and then Steve will draft language and we'll be limited to just what's here.
Yeah, I'm trying not to take up time, just trying to get a little more insight as to what the thought process you know, when they came back to it, you know, what their intent was, you know, so, okay, thanks.
Yeah, and if I can just add, I think largely what the thought process was is truly a matter of equity. Truly a matter of equity and making it more feasible for more diverse group of people who can be involved, people who have young children, people who come from different backgrounds. It gives more of an opportunity for people to be involved.
And this was something that wasn't an easy decision for the council because of the political matter of it. So I don't want to speak for the whole council, but I think everybody kind of agreed with the equity part of it. But they had a hard part of like this possibly being like the poison pill for the charter revision. But we do, I mean, I've been involved for some time. And one of the hardest things is trying to get people to run for office. And the amount of time that you put in for the council, especially since the compensation is there, it's just really not equitable. I mean, $600, $50 a month. If you have somebody you have to babysit or different things, it's really tough. And then also the timeline now we put pushed it back to, I believe, 2029. So it's really not affecting anybody on the council right now. But it's just something that we just thought was like Council President said, for equity, and also kind of doing the right thing, because 2 years ago we did say we're gonna do the easier stuff 2 years ago, and this time the more controversial stuff.
Yeah, no, I just had a question, so that it's clear in my head. So if I am on council and I have to get a babysitter, what part of that payment that I pay the babysitter is expensive? All of it, 3% of it?
Well, if you are. Or are you asking us?
You guys, I guess, more than anything, or whoever.
All I would say, and I'm speaking for myself at this moment, is if you are hiring a babysitter specifically so that you can go to a common council meeting, so you can attend a common council meeting, whether that's in person, hybrid, but make sure that you are able to fully focus on that meeting, then it would be documented. Imagine there would be some sort of a receipt that would be necessary, and that would be submitted, and it would be all above board with the idea of achieving the goal that Council President Smith and Councilmember Seed laid out, but very simply in an expense reimbursement program. It would be documented. There would be a paper trail for any sort of expense that is related to being able to effectuate the job.
Is there a cap on that, on how much I could turn in?
So I don't think we talked about a specific cap. I think that's something that we can collaborate on sort of what an appropriate cap is. Obviously, as Attorney Mennick said, that there would need to, or I think Tyler, I'm sorry if that was funny, but that there would need to be some sort of a budget line item. And frankly, there would need to be a budget line item for either, because either it's salary that's going to be budgeted for every year, or it's going to be an expense reimbursement program. There's already a budgeted for salary line for common council members. Currently, it's just under legislative, and it's $600 for every member of the common council.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, I think it would need to be determined in advance what would be expensible items. I think childcare, I think we all are well aware that that would certainly be an expensible item, but what reimbursable, yeah, what would the others be? And they would have to certainly be, the receipts would have to certainly be turned in, reviewed before any type of reimbursement would occur.
That I understand, but
Yeah.
let's say that Jim has $400 in babysitter expenses and I have 200. Does it matter, or would there be a cap of X number that you could do?
I suggest that in some ways we're sort of overcomplicating this. If it's going to be a 3%, if the number is going to be 3% for a stipend, let's say, per member of the Common Council, I think it's fair to say that by the end of the year, one way or the other, that stipend is going to be spent. Some people have kids, some people need a dog walker, who knows what things come up, but over the course of a year, it sounds like 3% is going to be used up one way or the other. And so rather than require people to submit invoices and so on and so forth. I think if we're going to do 3% as a stipend, we might as well just do 3% as a salary. Leave it at that, because net, that's really what it's going to become anyway. But the 3% or the stipend will, in all likelihood, be used by most members, not all, but certainly by most. And I think I think that's just the easiest way to do it.
One of the things that I thought about, and we're talking about expenses like babysitters, and that goes towards the equity part. But like one of the things personally that I thought about was holding like town halls or different events for public engagement. And that's something that constituents ask us as council people to do all the time. And we do it either on our own dime, or we work out something in the community, find parks or something. But with this is something that we will be able to hold events and community engagement to really reach out to the public. So the expense part, I think it might be a little bit more appealing to the voters, where it's not like the council is getting paid more. But I think we're thinking about like childcare and everything. But I think this does open us up as a legislative body to do community outreach, maybe newsletters and different things that we can reach out to, not just personal things that we have that comes up. But I think this could actually allow us to really be a legislative body and serve the community.
Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around, like, if the total year's compensation is X, then I could expense 3% of that, in addition to that, or what?
But let's say the number is $5,000, right? So let's say it's either 3%, it's either a $5,000 salary or it's a $5,000 expense. You would get $5,000 just for being on the council. Do what you want with it. Or, and I kind of prefer this, it is trickier to manage, but the expense portion of it is you get $5,000. Use that how you wish. It can be holding town halls, printing flyers, legislative newsletters.
That's in addition to your stipend.
No, instead
No,
of
it's not. Instead of your stipend.
You get one of the, that way there's some accountability, so you don't have sign, and I don't, I certainly nobody on the current council. I think, there were prior years where you have maybe you have council members who are no shows and they're not doing you're getting $5,000 for what? Versus if you have the reimbursement, you have to show, I held a town hall, I did mileage, I did babysitter, whatever it is.
But that's sort of a little unfair to people that need the money for babysitting and, need that. And so they use it for that instead of, printing flyers and things that have to do with their campaign, which is really a campaign expense, or not a campaign expense.
You can't use.
It's an expense of legislating. Yeah, it's an expense of legislating. But it seems to me that
I'm trying to understand why I have had my hand up since Commissioner Camacho, before you had your hand up and started speaking, and everybody else has been talking and nothing.
I didn't see the hand. I'm sorry, I was not looking there. Please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'm on a little bit of a deadline but anyway, to the point about the expenses, I'd like to bring up that when you are talking about kind of basically per diem, not a flat rate, you're looking at adding on administrative expenses. So we should be considering that. That is, part of what we should be considering, because it won't be just, a flat rate. There will be the administrative costs and a burden on people to submit receipts and process receipts and things of that nature. Also related, one thought that throughout we've been talking about the compensation. So Board of Ed, twice a month. If this goes through, do we have Board of Ed also some kind of compensation for their service, in which they also serve a couple of times a month in different formations, as we might call them?
Statutorily, they're not allowed to take compensation, the Board of Ed. State statute. So there would be no compensation.
Okay, well,
If they want to request compensation, we couldn't give them compensation under the charter.
To serve on the Board of Ed.
To serve on the Board of Ed.
If I can just add, which also is a question of equity right there.
That's a state statutory change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Which is similar to the problem we have at the council, where you have to go to referendum to get the compensation. So both bodies have some talking to do in the state legislature, but
Yeah, I had a couple of things that, and I'll discuss it when we get to the end here, that I thought we would address tomorrow. This is one of them, right? And so there seems to be, a range of opinions on how to approach this. So if everybody can kind of think about this and come to the table tomorrow with their thoughts put together on number 7, which is the compensation or the reimbursement piece, I think that would be helpful.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Since I won't be here tomorrow, I could call.
Please do.
Not myself, also.
I think that of the two proposals, politically, the easier lift is the second.
The reimbursement.
The reimbursement suggestion. Obviously, we have to do work on that, get language on that, set the cap and all those things. But I would worry about it passing a referendum if we're asking. If it appears that our council is asking for a raise, people tend to bristle at that. And it seems that the way the two options are laid out, we could make it work equitably through the budget process. And this, I think would be a good step forward. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rick, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm, it's very similar to what Jim was saying too. I come from a different whole ballgame on this. I was on the council for 18 years, and during that time, we had 5 children. You might want to stay away. So I come from that, and that was all on the, $47.12 a month. And I think I did it because of the passion of doing it, which I still do today in my job. But I think if you go at this as a race, I gotta be honest with you, it's a bad year to be asking for a raise. It's a political city election. And if you really come at it with a raise without some kind of or a reimbursement, which I have to tell you, at this point in my life, I was probably say, wow, yeah, it'd be a good thing to have reimbursement as a council person because of all that has come on and different things that have taken place. When you put a raise out there, you're throwing the biggest beach ball out to anybody that's running to hit back at you. So I just caution you on that.
Mr. Chairman, follow-up comment?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to either one. I'm just trying to figure out the guidelines.
Sure.
But I would agree with my distinguished people on the board here that again, I would challenge anybody to be able to stop somebody in the street and ask them how much city council people are paid. They probably think, oh, it's a freebie. My guess. I could be totally wrong. I don't know. So I would agree that I think if you take this to where we go to the ballot, you'll lose.
Doug, did you have something on this, on item 7?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. And this was discussion with Steve earlier. I just asked for some information. I think the way to go about this, because we had this discussion, we know what the barriers were to trying to take it out of the charter. Originally, we just said, take it out, and they can figure it out later as an ordinance list item. That the state legislative can undo this very simply. It's just a question, you got a Democratic majority senator leader, and just take it before the state legislator and take that section out and cured. Then the council can kind of do what it wants to do underneath whatever ordinance it wants to pass. Or put a salary in the charter, whatever they want to do. But I'm just saying, I think the method, because of the concerns, I agree with Mr. McQuaid and you, Carl, about that it's, every time the council is asked to have the salary raised, it's gone down amazingly in defeat, even during good times. So I think that's probably a wiser move long-term. And that way you stay out of the politics of it and just gets done. That's just my humble opinion at this stage of the game.
Thank you, Doug. I think this is a good one to continue discussing tomorrow. It's I think reasonable. We just have to figure out how we get there. I want to quickly jump back to item 6, because we have Councilmember Seed here, and I believe this was your proposal, if I'm not mistaken. Did you have any thoughts as to how you kind of came there? Because we discussed a few different approaches, and this one is unique from what we discussed. So just curious as to how you came to the 2 additional at-large NPR seats.
So the first thing came to mind was, and you guys know, this kind of dominated the public comment part of this whole process. And I just was kind of trying to think how we can get there. We don't want to take away voters' choice. We want to give voters the ability to decide who represents them. But I do understand and sympathize with people wanting to have a seat at the table. So I just thought and I looked at what we do, like kind of with the constables, and just went that direction and said, hey, we're not going to take away. And we did talk about possibly keeping it 15 and doing 2 out of the 3 that way. But I thought people might feel like we're taking something away from the voters and we're losing. So it's like, let's add two seats. People have a seat at the table and just run it the same way that we do with the constables. And the way that it is really is the top 7 vote getters are set. So we do say like the 2 seats are protected through minority representation, but you could have a race where you get 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats, or you could get 2 independents, 2 Democrats, and 3 Republicans. It could really work out anyway. So it really keeps the dignity of voters' choice, because voters decide the top 7, just like with today, or this year and years past, they choose the top 5. So it's just each party would be able to nominate no more than 5 candidates, and the top 7 vote getters out of the race of, like years past, I think there were 12 candidates. This year, we can have the same amount, or 15. There's still going to be winners and losers. Nobody's just going to have a clear way to the council seat. And I just thought that this was a way to listen to the voices that spoke up for minority representation, but also gave the voter still and kept the voters' integrity and voters' right to choose who represents them.
Thank you very much for explaining that. Any questions on that?
Yes, I have a question. I'll lower my hand. So is this, so we talked about increasing the size to 20. We in fact voted on it, but not having the additional 5 belong to any particular party. Just basically the top vote getters, I guess, would have been the on the Common Council. But because there are 20 people eligible for the Common Council, the thought was that presumably members of both parties would be more represented in a group of 20 than in a group of top 15. So, but what you're suggesting is that we have 17. And that would be a 7 at large, 2 of which would have to be a member of a minority party. Now, let's say, for instance, in this year's election, you have 2 non-Democrats taking District D. You have 2 non-Democrats taking District C. And let's assume that those non-Democrats are from the same party. And there's always a chance of a non-Democrat taking District E, which was historically the case. So are you suggesting
this is pretty
that
hypothetical?
Well, this is a hypothetical.
Where's this going?
Let him finish.
Well,
Sure.
it's not going anywhere if I can't complete it.
Go for it.
So there you have 5, let's say, members of a party not Democrats. Are you then saying that in addition to that outcome, that the party that is in the minority in terms of the majority vote of the Common Council, that they get 2 additional seats? Or is this at a minimum a member of a non-majority party, or a non-majority party must have a minimum of 2 seats on the city council, in which case that could occur naturally, or it could occur by virtue of these 2 additional seats that would have to go to, let's say, a Republican. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And in your hypothetical situation, the council still be majority Democrats, because it would be 10 Democrats and then 7 of non-Democrat. But the way that the charter is written is that the in-district is a separate section. And the at-large is a separate section. So there's no way to say, well, you get 2 seats. But if you pick up some in the districts, that you would have to rewrite both sections of the charter to kind of make that work.
No, what I'm saying is that if you have, you have 15 members of the city council, what you're saying is that 2 of them, let's say, because the city council now is 14-1 Democrats, you're saying that it needs to then be, it needs to be 12-3 in effect.
No, the proposal only addresses the at-large seats only. That's what we're discussing.
So that would make it 12.
So
that
a
would make it 12
discussion
so that would
regarding
make it
the
12-3 right
district
now.
representatives is not relevant to this proposal.
So that would make it 12-3. Am I not correct?
Well, it's gonna be a
No, it
seventeen,
would
it's gonna be a 17-member council.
It would be.
Correct?
But I'm saying if you have a situation like that with this current council, it would be a 12-3. Let's say if you have a 17-member council, then it would be
It would be going to 17 in this proposal.
right. So I guess my concern is that you're giving 2 additional seats to a party that may very well pick up 4 seats in a given election or 5 seats.
But in my opinion, it's the same thing that us as Democrats say to Republicans, like elections have consequences. So in this selection, we're not giving away the seats. In your situation, if you have a district that is picking up and people are picking up seats in the districts, they're going to be picking up some votes at large as well, most likely, because people vote voter blocks. So if you have a party, and I'm not going to, because this is the charter, and I don't think we should be talking about party lines. We should be talking about charter and structure. So we have a party that's picking up seats in district. So say D, E, and C, they're going to pick up some at-large seats. So the minority party or one party, they're actually going to be picking up seats as well, because they're going to be able to come in at 6 or 7 and still have a seat on the council. So either way it works, it just helps out, and the voters still have the choice because the voters are choosing people that's represented.
Yeah,
I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but what you're doing is you're giving a minority party 2 additional seats in every election, 2 additional seats to the seats that they pick up anyway.
Hold on.
Rick that's not accurate.
And I'm just thinking of, how this is all gonna look. Is this similar to what we do with constables right now, where each party nominates 4, and we end up picking 4, you get to vote for 4, and you end up with 3 of a minority party? Because we have to come up and figure out if the party's gonna nominate 5 council at large, and how many does the voter pick? There's a lot more to it than just saying, hey, let's add 2 and you go forth, because we still have to decide, how it's going to rotate. If you're going to, when we vote at large, just 1 term. It's got a lot more to a background to it too, of how it actually, we come up with the minority party.
So the way that it was written kind of mimicked the same way as constables. Each party could nominate no more than five candidates for council. So like right now you have 3 major parties or 3 parties in Norwalk. You have 15 candidates running, and the top 7 will be the ones that are run.
But that could flip every 2 years, because we'd have to vote for at large every 2 years. So your number could flip where it isn't minority party.
It's just, so it's in the way that it's written, Steve, correct me, it doesn't say minority representation. It just says that no more than 5 members could be from the same party.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the way you have to think about it,
Please.
The way you have to think about it is really a cap on majority representation. That's what it comes down to. And it's only on the at-large side of the council. I can think of many occasions, and what you do is you cap the nominations to the maximum number of seats that a party can hold. So the Ds would have 5, the Rs would have 5, and everybody gets to vote for 7. And I've seen situations, I can tell you in Hamden, where there was a very popular Republican candidate who always came in first or second in terms of votes. And a Democrat would come in on the at the last on the last item, because the cap doesn't set in until a party hits the cap. And so you could have minority party candidates finishing ahead of majority party candidates, and you don't get to your cap until the end of that process. But that's the way it works, but it's a cap on majority representation. So the MPR, minority party representation, is really kind of a misnomer the way it's written.
Counselor, so when I think of NPR, I do think of it more politically, just because of how it's stated minority party representation, but as you describe it, it's a little different. It takes it, this is the first time it kind of takes it out of being a political equation. When you just have it as a cap, then it's more of I don't know what I would call it, equity situation, but it doesn't strike me the same way. I have to think a little more about it.
Yeah, you can have a 4-3. It doesn't lock in at 5-2. You can have a 4-3. Yeah, voters can vote for 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats citywide, and you end up with a 4-3 split. It doesn't take effect. The cap on the number that you nominate takes effect, but it's actually based on a winner system.
I would feel very uncomfortable if we had language in the charter that said minority party representation. That would
Oh,
make me
absolutely.
very
We're not,
uncomfortable.
I don't believe that's.
But I was trying to get to that, but since we paid Steve, he explained it.
yeah.
What's that?
I said, I was trying to get to
For
that.
our boards and commissions.
Why are we uncomfortable with something that, we are a state of 169 cities and towns, and we are in the minority in not having minority party representation? Why are we uncomfortable with that? I don't
That was-
understand that.
Commissioner,
What's
that was
confusing,
me, that
yeah.
I said I wasn't comfortable with that
You-
because it's injecting kind of politics into the charter. And the way I understood our counselor here phrasing it, the language, it takes that out of the equation for me. So it allows us to have people from different parties without using that term. That was my issue.
So the nomenclature is more important than the spirit of the, what we're voting on.
No, but in a document like our Constitution, language is very important.
Oh, of course.
And so if we can get to the place that we want to get to without using language that's overly politicized, I think that's a good thing.
But if we can get to it in terms of, what we're trying to achieve, as opposed to what we're trying to broadcast.
And I think
What we broadcast, Joe, is very important, and it's something that we've discussed from the beginning of this, and it's something that we have to consider, and it's something that we just discussed with the compensation, right? I mean, it's whether you agree with the issue or not. We have spent countless hours, and the city has spent a significant amount of money getting this to a point where we can get it passed, right? We're not, things any of us might want to have in here that might be politically toxic when you go to vote on it. So I think how you phrase it and how you frame it and how you present it is very important. And I think you can get the ideas and you can get the spirit of these things in there. If done articulately, that'll give it a better chance of succeeding.
I just want to add that if that it's nice to talk about the at-large being separate from in district, but at the end of the day, there are 15 members of the Common Council. If what we're suggesting is that there be a cap, then I would have no issue with saying that capping that number at 15, that there should be no more than 15 members from one party having then 17 seats. So that leaves an additional 2 seats in the outside chance that there are no additional, that there are no seats picked up by the minority party except for that 2 additional seats. Because we really are talking about one Common Council. We're not talking about one at-large and one in district. We're talking about one Common Council. So if we want to reserve 2 seats for a minority party, I'm okay with suggesting that we cap the number at 15 for one party, and if and then have the additional 2 seats be members of other parties not represented in the majority.
Doug?
I just want to, I think the language as proposed is interesting and I think effective. it gets where you need to get without using the language, and I see the importance of that, because this is no different than Mr. McQuaid, you just chime in too. The Board of Education in Norwalk forever until the nineties was 4 seats 1 year, every 4 years, and no more than 2 from each party could run. And there would be 3 seats the following election, and no more than 2 each party could run. So guaranteed pretty much the Board of Ed was pretty split one way or the other. Rick, am I correct with that?
Yeah, but I
Okay.
can also, but I can say that that was
Well,
by
wait,
agreement.
hang on, Ed, let me finish.
All right.
I'm just trying to say, this approach is nothing new. It was law in the city of Norwalk for decades.
It wasn't
And no-
law. For the
It
Board of
was.
Ed, it was not law. It was something that the parties agreed
Well,
on.
it's in our chart. It was in our charter, it then changed.
The parties agreed, no, that wasn't in our charter. The parties agreed that the Board of Education, that they will not run more than X number of people. That was by agreement. That was never in the charter as far as I know.
Well, I think, well, I will verify, but as far as I know, that was done until they made the changes, I think in 95. I think it was the year they changed.
Well, there was that, but we had, I think everything
just
was in
saying-
district or whatever. When we went to at large as opposed to in district, that changed. But after that, we still had an informal agreement between the parties that would continue to be the case. And that was not by charter.
I will double check that.
Just- Okay. Doug, 1 second.
Yep,
Just
I'm
a
done.
brief-
I'm done saying I support this. I'm just gonna play this right now. The way this is language is the least political language. So.
Just one last point. As somebody I've been on the winning team where we had the majority, but I do recognize that we talk about diversity being Norwalk's greatest asset. And most of the time we're talking about by race or culture or different things, but also the diversity thought is really important. We do have one member who is from the minority party, and what she brings is some really good ideas, and she challenges the status quo, which is important. And what she does is, it's a tough job for her, but what she does is she represents a part of Norwalk who feels like they aren't represented. And for them to have a seat at the table, I believe is important. And with that one person, the big weight on one person is super, it's a hard weight to carry. And I think that for a lot of people in Norwalk, they don't feel like they're heard. And I could understand that, and I could see it, even though I like to think that we hear everybody. But having somebody that's sitting at the table that could talk in these committee meetings and that could really have a say-so when these decisions are being made, I think it's important to have that diversity of thought. And I also think it helps the majority because it just makes them better because you have somebody that's sitting at the table. You have at least 2 people that's sitting at the table that's representing them and speaking for them. And I think just them having their voice at the table, it really just goes a long way for the public. And I think, especially since it was a way that it's a conversation that was started here at the podium, I just thought it deserved some time. So I really think we could work it out, but I think we came in with a creative way and to go forward with this and without being too political.
Thank you. Nora?
Thank you very much. And I wanted to add to that, my hesitation about minority party representation has always been in elected offices has always been the importance of respecting the voter's choice, right? I am really reluctant to limit that. And what I really like about Councilmember Seed's proposal and why honestly, Mr. Camacho, I don't know that your proposal works as well, is that it is clear to the voters up front what their choices are. So I really liked the structure he proposed because it allows voters to know that for these 7 seats, they're going to have 5 choices. They can choose within them to whatever they think is the maximum sort of strategic value. A cap like Mr. Camacho is proposing where there's no more than 15 Democrats out of the 17. As I understand it, that would in some sense be decided, sort of post facto in the vote, right? I don't know how you would know in advance that if they're with a strategy like that, I don't know how the voters would know in advance which seats are going to go to non-Democrats versus Democrats, right? You're gonna have to decide that after the vote counts are, after the votes are tabulated, you're gonna have to decide, okay, well, we had 15 Democrats elected to these seats, so the remaining 2 are gonna have to go to someone else. I think it's very important that the voters get the choice, and that means there needs to be a structure in place where the voters can choose from the get-go how they would like to make their votes in relation to seats where there is a cap on a majority representative. So from my perspective, I just wanted to add that in, that I think is a key part of this conversation. I also wanted to really, the other point that I think is really important is that I like about the structure is that it is flexible to the ways in which Norwalk right now is a city of multiple parties and a lot of unaffiliated. You know, this flexible structure that it provides could work in any future configuration. And I think trying to game out some of the other potential ways of doing this are too dependent on sort of understanding our current situation, which may not be the case in 10 years, 20 years. And I like the way that this structure sort of allows for flexibility. It could certainly encourage some other things to happen, other parties to form, given the opportunity created by a structure like this. So for all those reasons, I thought this was the best approach, and I really applauded Councilmember Seed for proposing it. I think it gets where we need to go in a way that still respects what voters want.
Thank you so much, John. Did I miss you before you?
That's okay. So just gentle reminder, this, I think that Councilmember Seed has crafted a very elegant solution that addresses a very real problem. And the problem really is this, the way the elections for council are structured is that it systemically disenfranchises some group of voters. And you can characterize that group of voters any way you wish. But if you look at the most recent election for just the at-large council members in Norwalk, the one party gained 55% of the votes cast for at-large. And that party with 55% of the votes was able to get 100% of the 5 available seats. And the purpose of having a minority party representation, and I also regret using that language, is simply to allow those minority voters, in this case 45% who did not vote for the majority party, to feel as if they have a chance to get a seat at the table. And I think this is an elegant solution that would provide non-majority voters with that chance. Because right now, what we've heard loud and clear from many members of our community is they don't feel represented. And for good reason, they're not.
John?
Thank you. I mean, look, there's been a lot of debate, and we had an extensive debate at our council meeting, which I actually thought was really, Nora said this the other night, and I'm going to steal this from her, but I'm going to say it, that I stole it from her right in front of her, which is that she actually pointed out how great it was that we took the opportunity to really debate these issues and think this out. I do want to say, and John, I'm sorry to pick on you a little bit, but there is not a single person in Norwalk who is disenfranchised from voting. Everyone has the right and ability to vote. The question is whether they are able to gain a winning coalition to get a seat at the table. And that's the focus of this discussion. But I want to make it very clear, anyone who's registered to vote in Norwalk has the ability to vote in Norwalk, first of all. Second of all, the thing that I am most concerned about with this is a point that Rick brought up and is not, counters a little bit of the spirit of what Councilmember Seed proposed, which is that NPR could be used to tip a majority. So to turn a minority into a majority, especially in a closer election, and sort of using it to undermine what actually was the voter's choice. And that is my one concern, chief concern actually, with this particular proposal, is that it could be used in a way that could undermine what the majority of people in this community actually do vote for. So, and that can change from election to election, but I do think that the implications and sort of the way it could be used, especially if the numbers are tighter, is not something that I don't think we fully fleshed out, and something that we're going to have to think about in these next couple of meetings, but it's something I do want to put on the table because that could happen. I mean, as John said, I mean, it was a 10-point swing in the last couple elections, and anyone who's ever run an election before knows that 10 points can go away pretty quickly. So it's just something to really think about, but I do credit Councilmember C for, making the effort, and it was obviously something that, carried a majority of council members as a recommendation. That's why we're talking about it.
Thank you, Josh. And so to keep things moving along, if anyone else has any specific questions about how this would work or how this would be written or how the council came to get there, I think let's use this time to do that now. But if we're gonna, kind of debate the merits, we can do that tomorrow.
May I ask what, just out of curiosity, what was the vote? Not who voted, but what was the vote on the city council?
I believe it was 8-6. I'd have to check. I actually have my notes from the meeting.
It was 8-6.
It was 8-6.
Okay.
I do have one question. I wonder if as when we go to deliberations, Counselor, could you put some game out some things? So let's say we had a current council who's 7 and 8. With Republicans with majority and with Democrats in majority, and then talk about how this proposed changes could affect the balance of power, kind of what Josh was talking about, because over the years, Norwalk has been in a very different situation than it is right now, where it's so heavily Democratic. I'd be interested to see how those play out, because we have to think about unintended consequences, to your point, and so that will kind of help, I think, if that's not a heavy lift.
Okay, so I have one more question, maybe related to what you're saying, but the way is proposed now, so we would be expanding at large from 5 to 7 with 2 guaranteed. Would the 2 non-majority seats just be for the top 2 non-majority vote getters, or did you then have to account for other parties? So basically you have 4 parties who have candidates running.
So the way that it works is the top 7 vote getters will be the ones that's elected.
Okay.
So that could be made up of could be 1 from one party, 3 from another party, 2, like it could be split up. Whoever the top 7 vote getters, and the gist of that is it still keeps it to the voters decide the top 7.
Okay.
Yeah, just no more than 5
question
from one party.
Yeah.
Yeah, is unaffiliated a party, or would they have to be a member of either Independence or Working Families Party or something else?
It depends how they petition to get on the ballot. If they just petition, Mary Shablotnick running as an unaffiliated voter, she's unaffiliated if she gets elected.
So if you have the Working Families Party on the ballot, and they happen to be number 6 and 7 on the ballot, then that would work. That would be the minority.
That's the Hartford representation. That's Hartford scenario right now. Yep. Hartford has no Republicans.
Okay.
They don't finish ahead of the Working Families Party.
All right. So yeah, all right.
All right, so let's move on to 8, which would be, remember, we did 7, we'll move on to 8. This is the appointment of the Common Council employees. Were there any questions on that for members of the Common Council that are here?
I have a question.
John, and then, sorry, I didn't see who was online. Ed.
I understand the goal and it's clear and it makes sense to me. I'm just wondering, is this outcome not available to the council currently through ordinance?
It is not currently available other than the assistant clerk.
The council does not have line item authorities. If the council had line item authority in the budget, they could create a budget for their department. And so the rationale of having this type of provision would be that the Board of Estimate has to take into account a recommendation or proposal by the Common Council for staffing. It was a traditional situation where they had line item authority. You would need a provision of the charter that mandates the number of people working for them. This doesn't either. And one of the other things I want to point out, this came out, I think it was part of the debate, and I'll have the council members correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody did say that this should be done during the budget season. Council shouldn't be, the council shouldn't come up in the middle of the year and say, we want to have 10 new employees. It should be something that's done during the budget cycle.
Doug, you had a question?
No, yes, I have a comment. 5-5, I'm bringing up what John brought up. 5-5 to the city charter. It's very clear. It says appoint term and salary of city clerk upon commencement of the term of the office. The mayor shall appoint the city clerk, subject to approval of the common council. The salary set by ordinance, and their duties is actually the duties of the council. They are the the clerk of the council, and they're supposed to take minutes of the Board of Estimate and Taxation meetings. So that's in the existing charter, and it's underneath that charter. The council also has the right to pick an assistant city clerk. So I'm trying to figure out, that's why I'm asking the question of what, if something's already in the charter, this isn't referencing that. And I'm trying to figure out what the real change is, because pretty much the duties in that of what they're looking for. The only change I see in here is that if they want to appoint any additional employees, and they have the right underneath the city charter and personnel and that to create a position. It's all because all these positions have to be funded every year. Also, and the council also has a line item budget. It's pretty open what goes into it. Usually they just cover the salaries, and if the council members wanted to maybe go to a seminar of some kind, there used to be some money put in there for that. So if the council budget reflected another additional employee, then I think all they'd have to do is either create the position underneath ordinance and make sure it's funded. So I'm just trying to get clarity why this popped up when there's a section that kind of covers this, so.
Yes,
Yeah,
Councilor Smith had some insights.
Yeah, those items are just expense items. They're just a couple $1,000s in an account if, there's, some expenses that the council has or some type of training that we might like to do. It's not a significant amount of money.
No, I am aware of that. I'm just saying, if you wanted to put $70,000 in it for an employee, you could request it. I'm just bringing it up, the way it's written. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, and I think it depends on how you're reading it, and Attorney Mednick, I see you shaking your head no.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that what this does is actually moves 5-5D, which is under the mayor, into the council section. That's the first part of the proposal. So that's identical to what's in the current charter. The new part is that the council may at any time also appoint by majority vote any additional employees as it finds necessary to effectively conduct the council's business. And the Board of Estimate and Taxation shall appropriate compensation for any such employees as shall be fixed by the council. So that's the new language, is that they would have the ability to say to the Board of Finance, these are the staff people we need, you now need to fund them. So it's really kind of a mandated funding item for the staff of the council. That's the new part. The old part is in a different section of the charter being moved into the council section. It probably belongs.
Right, but it does give them the ability to also appoint an assistant city clerk, and that's totally a council choice as it exists now.
That is correct.
As exists right now, yeah.
Right, so, but okay.
Question, the language in the last part of this, the Board of Estimate Taxation shall appropriate. So basically, it's almost like there's no dialogue, there's no checks and balances. They just say, we need this funded. That's a little concerning to me.
Yeah, this is not an item that I support. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Najewski-Eichner.
Sure, thank you. So I think that part of the key point here and this gets maybe a little bit to Mr. Hempstead's question as well. The council is an independent legislative body. We are our own source of authority. We should have the ability to have staff if we think it's necessary without having to ask someone else for it, right? We should have an independent authority in the same way that the mayor has authority to make decisions about his staffing. We should have that authority. We did talk, I think, in some of the council debate, if we wanted to put a cap on it in the charter, but truthfully, this is the kind of thing where the voters are the check and balance, right? If the council goes crazy and appoints 10 staff members, I'm pretty sure the voters are going to vote them out next time round, right?
How will they
So,
know?
They wouldn't
People
know.
don't follow that closely.
well,
The general public, they don't believe.
I mean, truthfully, I think people do. I think that and on the flip side, if the council members use those 10 staff members effectively to do what is, for instance, done in Hartford, which does have that number of staff members, to do outreach, to do engagement, they host their budget events all over the city in different forums because they have staff members who can actually organize that kind of stuff. They have all kinds of communications and newsletters. Everything people yell at us about why we don't do them, that's because we don't have staff, unlike other councils where people do those kinds of things. So there's a sense in which, if that is what the voters want, and we deliver upon it, then the voters are going to be happy. If we, do it in a way that, the same way you can say with the whole rest of the budget. If the mayor goes crazy and appoints people that the voters think are excessive, then the voters will vote them out. It is the same check that anyone else has. And the council should have the same authority and be treated, quite frankly, with the same respect and assumption for our ability to do our jobs, with, caution and fiscal conservatism as necessary to get the job done. I really see no reason that we should be treated as somehow more likely to go rogue or with less sort of capacity to make an informed decision about what is appropriate for use of city resources.
I recall when I was on the BT years ago that on the city side, we would deliberate about new positions. And even to add a single new position to any part of the city side of the budget was always a robust discussion and was not taken lightly because of the, you have the salary, you have the benefits, you have a lot that comes with any one employee. There's a lot attached to that. And so that kind of robust discussion and looking at all the possible, how that's going to affect other aspects of the budget, I think we would need to have a structure that allows that to take place for me to have a comfort level than just to say, oh, Comcast hire this, hire that. So that's a little uncomfortable. I do understand your points, and I think that they're definitely with merit, in terms of what you could do with those. But the whole part of this thing is we want to try to create checks and balances in our government so that people can do good work, but also that people find it harder to do bad work. That's kind of the line that I think we tread here. So that's nice.
And again, I think I would raise the question, why would we assume that the council wouldn't have that kind of robust debate before deciding to vote to add a staff position, right? This staff position would still require a council vote. So I would assume that in order
I would assume you would have a robust debate within the council, but then as it pertains to the larger, city government, where does that go from there? It's just like, oh, you decide and then vote. So that's, and I'm not an attorney. I'm probably not the one. I think probably we could have Attorney Medic, who's much more understand these things much better than I. What are your thoughts?
I don't want to insert myself into the policy debate.
Well,
Try to
can I-
avoid the policy
Before
debate.
you do that though, can I just make another point? Because this is going to be relevant to the budget conversations we're having earlier. The current situation is that the BET makes those decisions unchecked, right? A lot of the proposals I am making are to give the council the authority to check the BET. So it's a fair point. If we're going to move forward with recognizing that unchecked budgetary power is dangerous on all sides, then I certainly think it's worth considering. But then we need to figure out how we check the BET as well as how we check the council. And I think that is part of the goal here. We have, as a council, if we're going to have the ability to check the BET, one of the things we may ultimately want is staff members who can help us independently review the finances. Right. So this, again, so I'm not in any way disagreeing with your point. I think what we need to think about is a way of making sure that the council has that checking authority and cannot be blocked by the BET in exercising that function, right? So that's sort of the concern here.
Okay.
And I think Council, Stephen,
I-
Mr. Bennett can
may I
talk to
respond
that.
to that before you go?
Yeah.
Because you have another, there's another proposal, I think, where you said have a member of the city council going forward that would be sitting on the BET as either a non-voting or voting member. That would be a way to inject the views of the city council into BET, budgetary discussions. So that I kind of like that myself, but so that's just my response.
No, I agree. And I think that's what I'm trying to suggest here is this is sort of the structure we're trying to set up. And I do tend to agree with you if there should be checks. What I'm objecting to is this idea that the only person who needs to be, or the only body that needs to be checked is the council. Because right now the structure truly of a lot of the charter.
I don't
is-
think
right.
okay.
Yeah. So anyway, Mr. Mednick.
Right.
Sorry, the question I think is, how have other cities made that allow their councils to establish their own staff?
Yeah.
Had a process to check council overreach on staff.
I think I addressed that a little earlier. The difference between what you have in Norwalk and what you have in the other communities throughout the state is that the legislative body is a participant in the robust debate on the budget, on the line items. And so it becomes political trade-off. It becomes a question of what is reasonable. How far can we push this with the public? How many people do they really want to have on a legislative staff? But they get control of the line items so that they are a player. They sit with the mayor and say, we're going to hire our 9 people. We're funding our 9 people. I've seen it where the mayor said, well, we're doing layoffs. We expect you to do layoffs too. That's always an interesting debate. But the difference is they get to be in the debate. This language is crafted because they're not truly in the debate except on the cap, setting the cap on that side of the budget. And so that's the reason you need to have some kind of mandate. I hear your point about, well, what if they come up with 25 people in staff? The way this language is written, you could construe that the Board of Estimate would have no choice but to fund the 25. That's a different issue, but the reason for the mandated language is that they don't have anything else to say about it. They don't control the lines of their department. They can make a recommendation on the items that you have for expense items. They can make a recommendation that we want to have 3 people on staff, but they don't have a vote on that.
What about restrictive language in this kind of?
Well, there's a number of things you can do.
Limited to a certain number of positions, correct?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you say,
yeah.
you can hire up a budget director or whatever community to, you can limit the number of positions.
This is wide open.
Yeah, and if you want to go beyond that, maybe it's a 2/3 vote of the body to go to the Board of Estimate, but have some kind of minimal staffing requirements that are mandated. And then figure out the rest of it politically. So you can do those things, and we would have to discuss that with the council to see how they want to.
But the BET does not have an independent financial person. The BET relies on the finance department, the way that the Common Council relies on the finance department. So if we're going to give an independent financial person to the Common Council, then why shouldn't the BET with respect to the budget process also be entitled to someone to independently review the work effectively of the finance department, which is what we're talking about here?
I don't have a point to this. I just want to note in the interest. I know that there was sort of an understanding that this was going to be more of an overview and asking specific questions, and that tomorrow night was going to be more of a delivery. So I just want to be mindful. I know we've been here for about 9 minutes, so.
Carl, do you have a question?
Well, my only question was that I agree with Jim, and so I asked a question. What the general counsel lady said. The mayor can add staff. Anybody can block that or not block that? Who approves the mayor adding staff? The BET. So I'm sorry? So you're asking that you have equal status with the mayor, that you could add staff, but it doesn't look like that the BET could disagree. This, to me, reads that it's a mandate that if you ask for it, you get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and like I said, I think good. Yes, and I think that the question there is sort of, to some extent, the differentiation between the BET and the mayor. But yeah, I think, if there is a proposal from the commission as to some way that we can have an effective check that would not result in the BET having the authority to block the council from doing anything. I think that is the sort of fear that would need to be addressed. But I think that, certainly the council, when we talked about this and had our long discussion, we were certainly open to ways of limiting and narrowing it. And again, without limiting flexibility, what the positions needed to be may change over time. One council may see a need for something that another council does not. I mean, I think that's part of it too, is that the council needs some flexibility to address what we're hearing from residents about what they're looking for.
Okay. Well, all I would say is I would agree with Commissioner Clark here that there seems to be some sort of language that doesn't allow people to just hire people just because they want to hire people.
I can't imagine the council wanted to do that. Certainly, checks and balances.
Okay.
Okay, so we will now, in the interest of time, I completely agree and didn't realize how far we've gotten along here. We're gonna move on to item 9, and we're gonna limit this specifically to questions, clarifying questions about the language. We'll do the debate on the merits tomorrow. Item 9, new language, regarding disclosure of applicant names, backgrounds, and credentials. Are there any questions about it?
So this was a split vote also. Do you recall what that was?
No,
Okay. Then never mind. 14. That wasn't.
So my question, I do have a question about that. Typically before, when the candidates are nominated, their resumes and everything are published as part of the agenda for that meeting before the Common Council, the agenda being public and all the attachments being public as well. So when does this disclosure, when is it anticipated that this disclosure would occur different from what currently happens? So when the person is nominated, there is a disclosure. So when would this be required?
So just to give you guys a little bit, the rationale for putting this forward is because there's been many cases where we receive documentation, or let's say someone's CV resume very late in the game when we have to decide on an appointment. So proposing this gives the council or our successors ample time to review CVs, candidates, ask questions. So that way we are not scrambling last minute to really assess a person's credentials for this position. The dates, that's something that we're still in discussion, but that's the proposal. That's the point. So we know exactly who applied, when they applied, their information, their backstory, and it gives our successors ample time to really kind of get a good sense of who these applicants are. So that's sort of the motive for this proposal.
So right now, there's no window of time.
Well, right now we get the applicant, we see their information, but it's on the agenda, which is a Friday, and we vote on it on Tuesday.
Okay.
So that makes it very difficult for us to actually really get a good sense of who the candidates are.
So would it make sense to impose a minimum of at least 14 days prior to the nomination, or 7 days, or some fixed number of days?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few comments here, and Ed, I think that I think that that's a reasonable request. Is a 2-week period. This is something that the council has been struggling with and asking for years, and there has certainly been an attempt from the mayor's office working with council leadership to improve that process. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think what this does is it memorializes what we've been trying to do and sets a requirement, because it has happened numerous times that you get an agenda, yeah, and we have we get it on Friday, we have a weekend. Sometimes people don't have the opportunity to look at their agenda until perhaps Monday, and then say, oh, I think this might be a person where we have some questions. You know, and you don't want a situation where you're moving someone forward and needing to withdraw their application, you know, need to withdraw their appointment on the floor. You know, we have seen that type of thing happen. So that, so I think what it will do is, you know, is really, and maybe it requires a little more detail, because I think it requires more of a process in the mayor's office, right?
So just one more question. Is this every person that applies, or every person that is thought about being put forward as nominees?
Yeah, so the thinking at first was to kind of get a good sense of who entirely has applied. But then we had conversations within our group. So I'm thinking to myself, maybe those who have been moved forward for appointment, like who've actually made the cut or are being considered to be appointed. So that's sort of the thinking. We're not entirely sure. And Steve, I can't remember where we left off with this, but I think it was the final list of those who are going to be who are being considered to be appointed.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I think the way it was a way to monitor the names that are out there. What I have found in other communities where I've established these provisions and charters, and this is not the charter language, this is kind of the intent. And the way it's done is that you allow members of the public to submit their names to the mayor's office, sometimes to the city clerk or the town clerk's office. And those two offices need to coordinate to make sure that they're getting the same applications. And I think this would require a disclosure of those applications. So you get to see on a regular basis who's putting their names in, because I'm not saying this has ever happened in Norwalk, but it's happened in other communities where a mayor says, no one's interested. And that's what that's what I point out. It's a good friend over
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And I think that's what they're trying to do. And so what I would recommend is perhaps have a quarterly disclosure requirement or a 30 days before appointment requirement for this, so that every quarter there would be a disclosure of what names are out there. Mary Shabotnik, again, my friend Mary from New Britain, put her name into the city plan. Would it be on the Planning and Zoning Commission, something like that, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you, Steve. That's exactly
the universe of applications. It doesn't inhibit the mayor's ability to make nominations, but it does increase pressure in terms of the diversity and the broad interest of people beyond the normal players.
Right, and provides transparency to us. We can kind of see who actually applied, what's the status of certain individuals, to avoid situations like you just mentioned. Right, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes and that sort of thing. So, yeah. You guys want to mention?
I was just a comment. I would agree with Attorney Mednick, and because from what I'm hearing from you guys is that you probably don't have time, if you really want to bring somebody in and question them, to do so. You find out that Steve's nominated on Friday, you got to vote on Tuesday. Steve's not available for whatever reason to see you, and bam, we go forward, or whatever the situation. And I don't recall, I don't know how many times you've actually had the opportunity for appointees or people that are brought up to be appointed to have them actually come and sit in front of council and have council ask questions. Maybe never. So I think in your interest and in the town's interest and in council's interest, the more time you got to actually vet somebody, the better.
And what I wanted to add additionally is that, you know, we have traditionally relied on council leadership, you know, in a leadership meeting, you know, with the mayor and his or her chief of staff, to, you know, move those forward. But, you know, you have 15 members, possibly 17 members, right, of a council who also have, you know, the experience that, you know, no names in the community. They might have a situation where, you know, they've recommended someone for an appointment and all of a sudden they're like, wait, where is, you know, I haven't seen this person. Maybe there's a reason they haven't seen that person, but I think that, you know, it allows, again, for more eyes on who is being considered, who's being appointed, and who's being left out.
I agree.
So just for clarity, the purpose of this proposal is to ensure that there is disclosure of all applicants which is a much broader pool than those, than just the nominees. Am I getting that right? Because currently it's only the nominees that appear to be publicly disclosed.
Right, so initially, my intention was to have all applicants, but, you know, we had conversation, I thought to myself, maybe that might be too much, maybe we should kind of look at the ones that who didn't move forward. But then again, if you guys have any other suggestions, I'm certainly open to them.
I don't know if you guys know the answer to this. Is there a wide gap between applicants and people who were moved forward to?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the council wouldn't actually know because it's not publicly disclosed.
And there is a provision in here to point out that if somebody does not want their name published, they can ask that it not published.
Then why should they?
In the
apply to be on
application
the board or-
process, right?
This is in a pre-appointment environment.
No, I understand, but then why even do it? It might be wanted in
It's
some
just not gonna be
states.
made
They don't want their spouse to know.
Because there's a political.
Okay, I'm gonna go there. I'll pass it. Yeah, I, just something sitting here and throwing it out there is, what if you propose the names at one meeting and voted on it at the next council meeting? That way it's out there publicly who the names are. And then on the next council meeting, you've had 2 weeks to do your homework and then you can vote on that. They'll probably cut out, a lot of things, including consent calendars, will be shorter than having discussions for a while on the names. So just tossing that out to you.
Say one more time, I couldn't hear. What was the?
If you proposed the names at one council meeting and at your next council meeting is when you vote on it.
Oh, gotcha.
2 weeks out.
Okay. Would that cover the need that you?
Well, you'd have to set it up for your need of, what the position is. Yes.
I think the only thing it would not cover, it covers pretty much everything except the concern about people who have applied, who don't make it forward. I remember also there was an idea, or John, I think at your beginning phase of this, that the idea is that the council has an ability to have some sort of oversight on how many people have applied, but not necessarily that every applicant be made public. So that there is a level of discretion and confidentiality, so that it's not, we're publishing 50 names, or how, I mean, I'm making up a number, but of all the people who've applied for boards. There is, of course, a public vacancy report that shows how many positions are vacant. But the intention, I don't think, and John, tell me if I'm wrong, but I remember from early discussions about this at our workshops, that the intention of this was not to have public disclosure of the names of all the people who weren't chosen. It's just so that there is some level of oversight. So if there are people who are chronically not being picked, or if there is a specific trend or a tendency or something, that the council will have the ability to look and have that discussion with the mayor about the kind of people they're oversetting should an issue arise.
But it also gives you a chance if there was an oversight in a name.
Yes.
You have a 2-week period.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's not a charter issue, correct?
No.
Okay, we will keep moving down the list here. We gotta start wrapping this up.
So just, apologies, this has gone back and forth and it has gotten very squishy. This proposal is for all applicants or all nominees? It can't be kind of a little bit of each.
So the reason I thought it was be all that.
Right, I understand there was
Yeah,
a
so-
thought process. I'm trying to find out what we have in front of us now.
So I mean, that's open to discussion. If you guys want to have it just all or just the final applicants, the ones that are moving forward. It's really up to you guys.
We
to
can
kind of
debate
make a
that.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where we're trying to
That's-
get.
It says
so-
all that, it says here applicant names, et cetera, so.
Yeah.
But we'll discuss.
That's part of the.
It's up for discussion.
Tonight, we are here to listen to you and to find out what you want. And it would be really helpful guidance if you could actually tell us if there's a preference between applicants versus nominees. And obviously, this is something that the council has not yet had a chance to discuss.
Yeah, and the tricky part about that regarding applicants is many people will apply. And, for example, they might send in their their resume because they're interested in the Oak Hills Authority, for example. There's no openings on Oak Hills, or they're applying for BET. There's no openings. And so they may feel that they're being left out or they're being ignored. And so a simple way to handle that is to just, when it comes into the mayor's office, an acknowledgement. I think that that's something where in the mayor's office that could be approved, is letting people know that, thank you for your application. There are no openings on that particular board right now.
Steve, quick question. Just quickly, what have you seen in other cities? I mean, that do they do something similar to this?
Well, there's similar, there's requirements to submit names. I don't think I've seen any where they were disclosing the overall list, although those are all subject to FOIA request, actually. You put your name into the mayor's office to be on a board. I imagine you could successfully FOIA those names already. And so, but what I've seen is a process where people are given the ability, and the mayor and the city clerk, usually the town clerk, has to accept the names. Town clerk would send them over to the mayor as well, so that make sure that everybody's got the names. I've drafted provisions like that for charters. I thought the difference here is that you wanted some form of disclosure of the names of all people who applied, so you get a sense of what the pool looks like that the mayor has been choosing from. And it would also give you an indication, I presume, if once the provision is not going to give you every detail of what you should do, but as you try to implement the provision, you might say you want to know the date that they put their name in, or things like that, because then if they put their name in 6 months before the vacancy was open, and a bunch of these people languished, but a week before the vacancy was being filled, the Republican Party or the Democratic Party put a name in that wasn't in that list. It tells you a story. I'm not saying that's bad, but it tells you a story of how appointments are made. And so the ones I've drafted have to do with the process of getting your name into the hopper. There's no disclosure requirements in most of them, but you could easily put a disclosure.
Got it. Okay, so should we keep the language as it is, all applicants, or since there's no? Yeah, right, just keep it. Okay.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
What kind of, can you imagine, what kind of, additional workload this would put? Would it be the town clerk, or who would be doing this work that this?
I think here.
The new person that they're gonna hire.
Oh,
That could be your
town clerk.
The council staff. It could be the town clerk, would be the city clerk, the way your breakdown works here, the city clerk's kind of the mayor's office already. But the reason you tend to put it to where there's a consolidated city and town clerk, to put it in that office, because that's an independent office.
Okay.
They're keeping a record, the mayor's keeping a record, and those records get consolidated at some point. I don't think it's a huge enterprise, frankly. It's done in most communities.
Good for transparency.
Okay. All right, let's move on to 10. We're only on 10 of 21. We're gonna
11, we gotta get moving. They're very.
Yes. Okay.
I just want to remind you, Tyler, that I need to leave at 8 o'clock, so I'm not going to be.
Yeah,
here.
we're gonna get through these. So 10 is fairly self-explanatory. Are there any questions for the council to better your understanding of item 10? Otherwise, we can.
10, 11, 12 were all on consent.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, 10 was split.
10 was split.
11, 12, 13. consent.
11, 12, 13.
10, any questions on what that is suggesting? No. 11, 12, and 13 were consent. These are review historical provisions.
I can explain that in 2 minutes, or less than 2 minutes. These are provisions I recommended.
Which ones?
11 through 13.
Okay.
These are all the historical provisions. We moved from the back of the document to the front of the document.
Yes.
My feeling was in a couple of these, we still had too much, and I'm going to take one last stab. I'm working with the chief of staff and with the Corporation Counsel's office to pare it down one more time if we can. So that's what this is all about. This is what we did 2 years ago.
Okay. Item 14, consider establishing 2 separate limits on total appropriations for general government and Board of Education. Any questions about that?
I have a question. Steve, has this been adopted by other towns? I was just curious.
I mean, what's been adopted?
The two budget
Number
caps
14.
versus one.
14. You have most, I'd have to look at all the budgets, but most of the larger cities do not have separate caps because the mayor proposes and the council disposes and they negotiate back and forth. The cap is whatever the council decides the cap is going to be. There are some councils that have limitations that they can't raise it by charter. Very few left. New Haven was one when I served in the 80s and early 90s, although we changed that. But so you have again a unique situation here where the council's role is really limited to setting the cap. So the answer is I can't think of any.
Any other questions on item 14?
Is this where we would need to, based on the comments of various folks, and that we would need to get an idea of a timeline that would work if we were to establish?
It's this and 14. It's this in the next item. Because what the cap does, if and the sponsor of this is here, but what the cap does is it triggers a renewed budget introduction process where if you're doing both caps, you're doing a cap on both sides of the budget, the mayor has to introduce a new budget based on the proposed cap on the general government side, and the Board of Ed needs to propose a new budget based on the cap on the education side.
And I think my question here is there, maybe we'll do good, because we were talking about, you mentioned the problem with the timeline, right? It's messing up the way you work. Is there a conceivable timeline where this two caps would actually work and allow you to do in the Board of Education side what you need to do?
I think that item 14, the separate cap vote is not related to the timeline. I think that's 15 and 16.
Are they co-joined in a way though, in terms of how
they're co-joined because they are regarding the budget, and I will turn this over to Ms. Najewski-Eichner in a moment. Yeah, so, and you know, this was a split vote with some very strong feelings on both sides. I will say that for me, I feel that I voted against all three of these for a couple of reasons. One, out of respect for the work that you have done and the months of time that you have put into looking at your recommendations, and I feel that these require a great deal of vetting as well as public outreach. So that's part of it. And certainly we've heard from members of the Board of Education and the superintendent and her staff. But also in terms of the cap, I feel that, we are a city and we have one cap. And these are the departments of the city. The Board of Education is a department of the city. So we do set one cap. We do, speak about that. We delineate when we do set the cap, but, we propose, well, it's in the language, it's not in the language that is on the resolution, but, we do speak about it. But it is, we're one city, and I feel that, there's no need to separate it for a vote. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Najewski-Eichner for her argument.
Thank you, Council President. And just to be clear, this did get a majority of the council votes, so the council position is to recommend this. And I think to your very cogent question, the issue here is that at the moment, the way the process works is that the city and the Board of Ed provide a budget in January. The city then, as a matter of practice, but not as a matter of requirement, provides us with an update when the cap is done. This is what the city budget the city side, the non-BOE side looks like with the in compliance with the cap. And that is what goes to the BET. On the Board of Ed side, that doesn't happen. So the BETs, all of the conversations that happen in the city after the cap is done are still looking at a Board of Ed budget that is not compliant with the cap. And so that makes it very hard for parents and the BET and the council members who are trying to respond to parents to understand what the consequences of the cap are for the Board of Ed budget. No, and as I think everyone from the Board of Ed told you, certainly we understand their process, but that process means that voters and parents and anyone else does not actually see a cap compliant Board of Ed budget until April or May, or even later. And that really creates enormous confusion and leads to some of the situations we saw this spring. So no one is suggesting that they are restricted from making changes, right? I mean, in the same way that the city can continue to edit their budget as it goes through the process, but it would be profoundly helpful. I think the council feels like it would be profoundly helpful for all of the conversations that happen in March and April and May to happen in relation to a cap compliant budget, so that we can be having realistic conversations about what the budget cap means for both the Board of Ed and the city. So that's the proposal, and it certainly may necessitate changes in the Board of Ed's process. And I think, we had provided them with some of this information. I think, the city CFO had made some recommendations and changes in dates, which you're seeing here. I think certainly if the Board of Ed has recommendations on changes in dates, we would recommend that you consider it. But I do think that this idea of needing to have an interim cap compliant budget is really the core concept, and whether it moves by a week or two, but I think that it is very hard for everyone to grapple with the budget caps impact on the Board of Ed budget if we don't see what that looks like. And that's the motivating sort of force here. And I do think that also, and again, Attorney Menda can weigh in on this, certainly my understanding of what happens in other jurisdictions, when Darien was having some concerns this spring about how their budget was going to be cut, like they put forward a budget proposal that showed what the cuts were going to be. And then there was a lot of weighing in on that from residents in Darien, and that all happened in January and February. We're having those same conversations in May and June. And that, I think, is the challenge we're trying to address here.
But isn't the reason that we're having the conversations in May and June is because it takes until approximately May or June to actually figure things out because of the complexities of how the Board of Ed is funded. But also, my understanding, or at least what I recall, is that the budget that's presented to the BET, at least initially, is a budget that proposes, or at least to the Common Council also, is a budget that proposes a cap that includes, let's say, a 4% increase or a 3.5% or whatever increase for the Board of Ed. It may not stay there. It may end up being a 3.9% or a 4.3%, but it is a budget that is, the budget that's presented has effectively a number for the Board of Ed, isn't it? Isn't that the case?
It does, but what we do not then get is a line item budget of how that would play out. So the line item budget that the Board of Ed puts forward in January does not get updated in a sort of public line item document, at least that the council gets, until that goes public in May. So it is exactly that question of how is that cap going to be implemented that is the issue here. Certainly, again, no one is suggesting that it cannot continue to be modified as the process goes along in the same way that the city does so. But again, it is an expectation. The city puts forward a budget, in January, February, March that they modify to reflect. It doesn't seem unreasonable to expect that the Board of Ed similarly could put forward a line item budget as to how their half of the budget was going to run. If that's something that, can be done on the city side, I don't know why it couldn't be done on the Board of Ed side as well.
Rick, you had a
Yeah, I have to be honest, this is exactly the reason, the go-between here that we've just listened to. That I don't think that in 8 days, we can solve all of this. This is too big a thing to try to complete in 8 days and do right. There's good conversation on both sides. There's reason for doing it, But this is way too big to be coming to us 8 days before we have to come up with the answer and do it right. So I gotta be honest with you. I don't even want to touch this. And it's not because I'm running from it, because the dates make sense. A lot of the stuff does make sense. But to do it right, we've been going at this thing for almost 10 months, guys. And we're coming down to 8 days where we're gonna make major decisions on our charter. I don't think we're doing our due diligence, and I don't think we're doing the right thing for the residents to be doing this. So I'm letting you know right now, I don't even want to touch this. And I'm hoping my other commissioners understand. That's a lot of work. And we're doing this tonight. You've seen how long it's taken us to get through 14? And then we have to discuss it all. It's not going to be ready and done right for the 5th. That's my feeling. I agree.
So I think the one comment I'd raise in counterpoint to that is that I think this in particular is an issue that really crystallized for a lot of people in the city this spring. That this is an issue that really crystallized for a lot of people this spring, and I think it really cast into high relief where we had a gap in our budget process that I'm not sure had been sort of quite as clear to residents prior to this. And I mean, this is an issue we've talked about quite a bit with Mr. Mednick. It is expensive for the city to do charter revision. We can't be doing it every 2 years, you know, and so we come to a point where we're also saying we need to tackle some of these. And if we don't tackle it now, do we tackle it in a decade? You know, if a problem has been identified. So that's, again, part of why the council, I think, spent quite a lot of time over the last month debating this. I mean, this is the product of, I can't even remember, I think we had 5 meetings talking about this, because we are cognizant of the fact that we're stuck with the system if we don't make changes now. And that may be that, you know, may mean that we are leaving voters with something that they are frustrated by when we had an opportunity. So that's I think that's the counterpoint to that position to consider.
I've just been here a long time, and I've seen when you rush things through and don't do them right, you're gonna wish you had charter revision every year. So that's my opinion. And I, respect yours.
No, I hear you. Absolutely.
I have a question, Rick and Carl, you're referring, when you say you don't want to touch this, are you referring to items 1 through 21?
No.
Or-
No, no, no,
Oh,
no, the items that we're discussing now.
which is 14 or 15 through 20?
14, 15, and 16 pretty much come in the package, and that's how we discussed them at the council.
So 15 through 20.
Nope, 14, 15, and
3 items, 14, 15. Items that should split for one thing, because I'd like to hear more on the split side of what happened.
Mr.
I
Chairman,
know it's
may I ask Mr.
Please.
Osmani a question?
Please.
Question for Mr. Osmani, because when we heard from all the Board of Ed folks, you all said 2 caps is fine, but all of you mentioned timeline issues. Have you, in your discussions, or have you figured out a timeline adjustment that actually would work? That you could propose to us? Because unless you know, we're given a timeline that will work for the actual Board of Education, we'd be foolish to require them to do something that by charter that they can't accomplish.
Yeah, and Luna, feel free to answer, but I wanted, and I was gonna note this when we got through the list, but tomorrow we have officials invited to join us, and I would certainly like to extend that to Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Osmani to join us tomorrow so that they can continue to answer questions about this if they're available.
Do you mind if he answers?
Please do.
Sure, and Jared and I have had conversations on this. As we had mentioned, and I think you've heard from the board, we don't particularly have an issue with 2 caps because I think practically we do it now, as I think Mr. Camacho mentioned when that is presented. So that's reasonable. We don't have an issue presenting a line item budget either, as Nora mentioned. We do that now, but we do it in May, right? And I think what this is trying to get to is to get that line item, reconcile line item from the budget in March as opposed to May. And when we looked at our calendar and the way that we do the budget from a timeline, to answer your question, we would then have to engage the schools for the school-based budget portion in November, December, and January, so that, because we don't know the cap until February, right? February 28th, I believe, is a no later date then. And then to get to the council by March, no later than March 21st, we would have to get something to the council. We have to have something done by beginning of March. And so from a timeline perspective, that's when we would have to have engaged the schools and the principals and the school governance councils. That is the process we currently have, but currently that happens in March and April. And so we would have to do that in December and January. And I think the concern on the Board of Ed is that, not I think, I know, the concern is that that is not the most opportune time to do that with the schools. Schools are just getting in, we're engaging the principals, it's around the holidays. And so that's the issue. What could work, however, is if the cap, and I know Jared is not going to be a fan of this because we've talked about it, if that council cap is set at a later date than March, we could still comply and get a budget to the council before they set the final cap. It's just challenging for us to do that by March 21st. If that date was later, and I don't think 2 weeks is sufficient. Right now, we're talking, we do this 60 days from this date. And so a date later than March 21, we would be able to bring that to you within the cap, but it's just very unrealistic for us to get that done by March 21st, which is the current cap date that the council sets.
Thank you.
Please.
All right. What I've had in mind for throughout this whole process and these changes that that came to us kind of on the later side was to number one, make sure that we don't extend the process out too far. As it stands right now, we're one of the first municipalities to complete our budget process, which gives us a huge advantage in statewide because you have 169 municipalities competing for consultants and people to help us with data so that we can get out our tax bills. This Norwalk has a strong tradition of getting that out, getting our tax bills out early, which helps us obviously bring money in early, which is very beneficial to our treasury, but also helps us in just processing the mailings, processing the bills so that we're not in as much competition with all those other municipalities. So with all the changes that are going on, I did propose a schedule which pushed the entire process out by a week. I don't want to go out any further than a week. And so to the extent that whatever is decided about with what you want to do with the Board of Education and accommodating their schedule and their needs, that would be my only request, is that we don't extend this whole process out any more than the week that I've already proposed to extend it, because it's going to have a huge impact on the city and our tradition of how we send out bills and how we take in revenue and how we compete with other municipalities. So please keep that in mind as you're considering this proposal. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And again, both of you are more than welcome to join us tomorrow evening when we dig into this as much as we possibly can. So
can I make one more quick comment about that though? Because I think that this conversation, and I really appreciate Mr. Asmani, your position on this, but I think that it actually highlights exactly what the challenge is here and sort of why this is so important. As Mr. Asmani says, we then are making a decision about how much we're going to give the Board of Ed in the absence of a budget that reflects that allocation, right? So the current situation we exist in is that we make a final determination on the number for the Board of Ed without anyone having seen a line item budget at that number. And that's a problem. And I think that is, again, I think this spring sort of took that into high relief in a way that many of us have been realizing it was a problem for a while, but it kind of catapulted it to everyone's consciousness. That doesn't make sense. Like, it just doesn't. And I respect the school system's desire to have a very fulsome process. And I don't really know why you couldn't continue to have that fulsome process continue but still give a preliminary approach to it in March, right? Again, all of the other city departments are doing their budgets. You're absolutely correct. The city departments are doing their budgets in December. And that may change and things may happen. And certainly we do occasionally see revisions then come up. But it really worries me, quite frankly, as a pure matter of governance, to be making a major decision like what percentage half of the city is getting without there being a line item budget that justifies that.
Okay, so, let's cover item 15. Any questions there? It's similar, right?
Yeah.
We did, that was Luke Dumas, okay.
14, 15, 16.
Okay, so 17. And this was a consent item.
Yes.
Okay, any questions there? 18, another consent item.
Yes.
Okay, any questions? 19. Do you have questions on 19, or does anyone on the council have comments to offer on 19? Okay. 20, pretty self-explanatory. This was a consent item.
Yes.
And 21. Any questions on 21?
The only thing I want to say on 21, if I can,
Please.
Mr. Chair, is that, and Jared and I have talked about this issue, I believe. This is not a prohibition of BET action for any of the functions that they have after a budget is approved. This is only an effectuate so that they can do the things they normally do. This is dealing with modifications of the final budget as approved by the council. So once the council approves it, they can't do anything to it at that point.
Okay.
I believe that's the intent, not
Yep.
during the budget year for various revisions they might make, the transfers, et cetera.
Just a question for whoever want to
Yes.
answer this. What situations that have either occurred or that you considered might occur prompted you to include this language in 721?
So this relates to the current budget language, or excuse me, the current charter language. The council is authorized to override the budget by a 2/3 vote in order to increase the budget, but we cannot specify the purpose. And then the BET is not actually currently required, and Steve Mendick and I talked about this quite a bit. The BET is not required under the current provisions to allocate the monies that the charter, or that the council increases. So what has happened in the past, and I'm super honest, I have lost track of whether the vote actually happened or whether I merely fought with Corporation Council about this for so long that we ended up not putting the amendment forward. But if the situation is that if the council votes to allocate an additional $1 million, the BET does not then have to appropriate that $1 million. And so the 2/3 vote is purely symbolic. There's nothing in the current charter that requires that the BET follow the wishes of the council when the council has done that override vote. And so that is what this is changing. This is then meaning that the final decision rests with the council and not with the BET.
Counselor, could you look and see if we have any situations in the past where that's happened, where the council has made modification to the final budget and then the BET has actually
Yeah, it's happened.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
So last year?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
2 years ago?
That was we had allocated an additional $1 million for the schools, and then the BET chose not to allocate it. So
All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I understand.
Any other questions there on 21? Jim?
More of a comment, that I think a lot of these changes, first, Mr. Medic, correct me if I'm wrong, the way that it's set up in the charter now, it might even stated that it's a strong council, weak mayor set up.
Strong council, weak mayor.
Or is that the way that everybody just thinks that it, no, okay?
I think it's the opposite.
Yeah.
That's a strong mayor.
Strong mayor,
Weak council.
weak council.
Yeah.
But I think as a legislative body, a lot of these amendments that Ms. Najilski-Agner had brought up, kind of gives the council the power that a lot of people in Norwalk think that we have. And I think that is something that a lot of people, they come to us, they just started going to the BET meetings recently, but they usually come to the council meetings and asking us to allocate money or do different things. I think that this really gives the council some type of wiggle room without taking all of the authority away from the BET to really make some changes. I also think that, and I was kind of waiting just to sum it up so that we don't talk about everything, but I think that the relationship between the council and the BET is really going to be improved if we have a member that's either a voting member or non-voting member on the BET, because a lot of times you think, okay, the council is going to be able to have a say in the decisions that the BET has. But the way that I see it, and I think even more beneficial, is that that member that's sitting in the BET meetings is going to come back to the council and let the council know, this is why we didn't allocate this, and this is why we didn't do it. And I think it partners nicely with the council being able to override something, because the council is going to have that knowledge of what's going on in the BET, because they have a member that's a part of these meetings that's coming back and say, hey, this is why we made these decisions. So if something was to happen, and we had needed a 2/3 majority vote, it's going to be an informed decision. And it's going to be one that I believe Ms. Najilski-Eigner, she said, she didn't say it today, but the buck stops with elected officials. And I think that's something that our constituents want, is they want their elected officials to be empowered to make the decision, and they want to be able to hold them accountable. So I think it's a really good package that comes together and allows the council to do what people think that we can do. And it also has a lot of restraint in there because the 2/3 vote is something that it's not easy to get unless everyone agrees on it, and it's usually a good thing. So I just think that it's kind of a package and a lot of good things. And I know it's a lot of stuff for you guys to do, but it's something that we debated about. And I just think that it all kind of ties together for the people and kind of what they expect us to do.
Thank you very much, Jill. I appreciate it. All right, so does anyone have a question for any of our council members before we adjourn? Back.
I think you want to go back
Yes.
and discuss the.
I have one.
Oh, so yes, we had
Skip
we had the last one. So we will go back to number 4, Barbara and Rick. Since you're escape hatch.
Can I, Tyler, just the question on number 21 that we're discussing at the very end. The council doesn't vote on a final budget.
So I said, what was the question?
The council doesn't vote on a final budget. Doesn't approve the final budget. Council only currently approves a cap. Done. The only thing they can do is move either by request of the board of estimate, and that's one reason that was put there. They can increase, if the board of estimate created, we need more money, it didn't appropriate enough, because that was done a couple times underneath Mayor Knopp, where he did not, Rick was there, he passed along a stay-in-place budget they had the year before, and they came back and asked for additional money later on. That's why that was originally put in there. And all the experience I had, there was one discussion way back, I think in 2009 or 8, about somebody moved forward to increase the cap and it did not pass muster. I'm just bringing that up because currently the council does not approve the budget. So that's why I'm asking the question. That's all. Like, you would need another change somewhere else in the charter then also. That's why I think Ms. McQuaid hit it on the head.
Yes, so this is why 19 and 21 are tied together, because 19 is what gives the council, increases the council's override authority. So we currently have override authority, but that override doesn't stick, basically. So the idea is with 19 that we would have override authority and that would then stick in 21. So I agree, in years where the council doesn't vote to override, then the BET's decision is final. So 21 only applies if the council votes to override by 2/3, then it changes that to be the final decision.
Yeah, but again, it's the cap and not the budget.
Right, well, so that if you look at 19, the authority that is added in 19 is for the council to specify the use of those additional funds, or where the additional funds should be removed if the council votes to remove. So in a sense, it's an extremely limited line item provision just at the end, just within 1% of the budget, and really is intended to address situations like you're talking about, Mr. Hempstead, where the council for some reason feels like the BET got a particular line item wrong and is trying to fix that line item.
All right, so what would prohibit? I know we're supposed to get into this internally, but I'm trying to figure out if you changed a line item and say we need another $1 million because we want to do a fire station. All right. Well, that's a capital line, but whatever. You want
Sure,
more
another $1
percent-
million to the fire department or
Yeah.
some particular
All right.
line item.
Okay, so the BET gets that request back, you put another $1 million and they say, you know what? We don't want to approve that. We're gonna take $1 million then out of the police department and put it in the fire department and not spend the extra $1 million. Nothing here prohibits that.
No, it would. That's what the combination of, so that's what 21 would do, would say that, so whatever the council voted in their override vote, that then is the end of the story. The BET cannot change that. So if the council makes a line item appropriation in their override vote, then that $1 million goes to the fire department and the BET cannot change it and take it away to give it to the police department.
So that comes from the taxpayers.
Pardon?
That comes from the taxpayers then, the additional $1 million, because you can't take it from anywhere else.
Yeah, it would be part of the budget.
It'd be part
Yeah,
Right, and so part of what you'll see in there is that's why we put the 1% limitation in order to, again, the goal here is to allow the council to make minor corrections where they think there was an oversight. And the council could, for instance, do a line item where they appropriated $1 million from here and took it away from somewhere else. I mean, that wouldn't necessarily say that it would have to change the cap. The whole point is that the council may think that there is an adjustment that could be made to stay within that. And that's the whole goal, is sort of, again, to have, as we talked about earlier, to have a check. And not to have a sort of enormous rewrite at the last, but to allow the council to have some authority to check what they see as a potential error.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry. I just want to know what is broken that you need this many fixes?
Writ large? Or I
Well-
mean, specifically to this, to the override? I mean, I can give,
The whole package. I'm trying to understand so I can clearly figure this out. What is broken that needs all these fixes?
so I think that what is broken at the core of this and what we're really trying to address, and I think Councilmember Seed sort of started laying this out. At the end of the day, accountability should rest with elected officials. I think fundamentally there is a problem with having final budgetary authority rest with unelected individuals. And so and that writ large is why BETs have largely fallen by the wayside in virtually, everywhere in Connecticut and certainly across, the rest of the country, right? This is a form of government that does not exist very often, because voters should have the right to hold accountable the people who set their budget. We're proposing here, and this, I think, very much in relation to Mr. McQuaid's point. I mean, these are issues that have, gotten raised at various points in the last charter revision and this one, but the council is trying to put forward provisions that maintain the sort of overall structure, that work within the BET, that clearly, many people in the city feel very comfortable with, but that try to shift the balance of power to make sure that the legislature is in fact a co-equal branch of government, which right now it truly is not. And that at the end of the day, the elected officials are the ones who make the final decisions if there is some dispute, right? Because some years there's not a dispute. Some years the council has not tried to override. Some years the council has had no issues. In other years, as we mentioned, there was the $1 million 2 years ago. There have been other examples we can talk about, and when our constituents come to us and they are upset and angry about what happened in the budget process, and all we can say to them is, we don't control that. It really upsets people. It wastes their time because they've come and advocated to us and we have to tell them we can't do anything. And it, I think, really undermines their confidence in the sense that their vote and voice matter. So that's the core problem we're trying to address here. And we're trying to find ways to modify the current system to make it more of a dual relationship between the council and the BET without sort of overhauling totally the structure. So that's the thought.
Was there any thought during this process about then instead just making the BET an elected board?
We did talk about that. I think that you end up then with a situation like you have in Stanford, which I don't know that anyone thinks is a particularly productive form of government, right? That's just seems to have become largely mass chaos there. And if this, I think my point on this is that, sorry, because let me point to, so one of their core issue here is that the council are the ones who then oversee all of the department's decision-making, right? We actually understand day-to-day what's happening in the departments. We spend year-round talking to them about what they're doing, what they need, what their projects are. But we have no oversight then as to what their budgetary items end up being. The BET has oversight of their budget, but doesn't have oversight over their day-to-day process. And if you make the BET an elected body, you say, great, and this is, I think, something Mr. Camacho and I have talked about in the past, well, then the BET should start understanding better how the department works day to day. Well, what does that end up becoming? That ends up becoming, that's the council, right? I mean, that is why in most places around the country, the budgetary authority rests with the legislative body, because understanding those two things together are so deeply intertwined. And so anyway, so we did talk about it. I don't think anyone felt like it was a way that was ultimately going to improve the working of the city. We felt like it was just going to increase the number of people running for office while still having the split function that didn't really serve the voters well.
One real quick, just last thing I'll say is that, so when Nora proposed this, that I said to myself, okay, well, how can we actually strengthen the legislative authority of the council to be able to respond to community needs? So I set a percentage, what I thought was reasonable as a starting point, but we are directly the representatives of the community. So I said, okay, let's still respect the institutional role of the BET while allowing greater legislative authority for the council to respond to communities when, some priorities may deviate. So that's sort of, that's the problem that we're trying to fix. It's the lack of legislative authority to be able to respond to community needs. And so 1%, I think it's very reasonable, and it still respects the institutional role of the BET. Yeah, that's it.
But at one point you also, sorry, Tyler, at one point you had mentioned that the council needed more people because there's too many committees and too much work for the present number of council members, and that didn't come along with this, because you're asking the city council to take on more work and more authority, which means more work. But you haven't, the only proposal I have was increasing it by 2 people. So I'm just wondering if all that was put in part of the process of thinking, because originally that was brought up that from some members of the council in the beginning that they felt they needed more council people to do committee work. Or too many meetings.
I'm not actually sure if that was a recommendation from the council or that was a perception that some in the public have had. I don't think the council feels that way. I think that we feel very strongly that the 15 or the 17 is sort of our maximum for being able to have kind of effective discussions. And we all want to be engaged and, in multiple committees, because that is sort of the whole point of the work, is to really understand what's happening around the city. And truthfully, I'll be honest, I think what residents, and this gets back to that staffing point, I think what residents are responding to is they really wish we did more communications. And that is not going to be solved by having more council members. That's really going to be solved by having people who actually have the skill set to do things like newsletters.
Would that, would that would the council, city council, having the ability to hire folks, take some of the load off that you have in certain areas as well?
Yeah, it's, it might, I mean, I think we got to the council, future council, to figure out how to do that most efficiently to taxpayer dollars, to your point, but it's certainly.
Okay, so let's do the final one, Rick.
I'm out of here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
There was a show called The Weakest Link.
I'm
Rick, I know
biased.
it's The Weakest Link.
Wow, I will.
I should be the weakest link. I would put myself out.
Oh, that's good.
Correct.
All right, so the last one, and I mean, this is the term of office question.
Bye-bye.
The comment was pleased. by the council for a
He missed you downstairs.
What was that?
I think that they, I'll let the majority.
We'll let Rick get out.
Yeah. I'll let the majority.
He's us, he's out.
Yeah, all right, good. To be, this item, and, you know, just for the record, our members Darlene Young and Councilmembers Darlene Young and Barbara Smith recused themselves from this discussion. However, when it came to a vote, when it came to a council recommendation, it passed unanimously.
What was
The recommendation, so as written here was 4-year terms.
Yeah, but it doesn't say, it just says. term of
Yeah,
office,
and
doesn't
it
say
is,
4-year term.
it was understood throughout the workshops. It was a 4-year term for the mayor and the town clerk. The one piece of the recommendation that I think that we didn't really vote directly on, but was a subject of discussion, was whether the council would run coterminous with the mayor or opposite.
Right.
And there was a mixed view on that subject. We did not take a vote on a recommendation of whether the council would run with the mayor or opposite the mayor. There were arguments raised in both directions, in both views. Obviously, the commission had made a recommendation for it to be opposite. It's not coterminous, it's whatever the opposite is. But in terms of whether there should be a 4-year term, the council was in agreement.
For mayor, clerk, and council.
Yes, mayor, clerk, and council 4-year terms. Yes,
Unanimous for all of those.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions here, for the remaining members of the council on that?
That's,
I do.
I think, well, go ahead.
Please, John.
If that is the recommendation, it would be helpful to just simply spell it out, so there's not confusion on the part of people like myself.
Appreciated, and I get that, but that's what we're saying, you know, tonight, and that is.
We hear it tonight, I just didn't hear it previously.
Can I just explain where we are in the process?
Yeah.
And sometimes the recommendations that the council is going to throw back at you may be vague, because there are differences of opinion. The objective at this point, and this reason the council members are here, as you start to deliberate, you need to be mindful of the head nods on the other side of the table and the conversations that you may have with them regarding the direction you're taking, because when we make the proposal, the final report that goes back to them has to have language that they can either support or oppose. They can't amend it. So the real key right now, so your question is a good question, John, and I think we got Majority Leader made clear what the ambiguity is or where the split is. The commission has to kind of figure out where they want to go with it and get a sense of the members of the body. You may either try to assuage them and find a way to reach a compromise that will get a unanimous vote of the council, or you may not. But the objective is to try to get there in this process. So there are, that's why there were some choices here. That's why there are some either ors, and I think you had some really good dialogue that will help inform you for tomorrow night, and some of these folks will be here tomorrow night to hopefully answer your questions if we go through that process.
So the other part of my question was, I personally think that the voters should get to decide on these issues if the council wants it to appear on a charter revision referendum. My question is, would this particular item, just because I know it can be considered controversial by some, can it be broken out as a separate ballot question from the rest? And I don't know how that works.
It's something that, I mean, look, I don't wanna, I'm gonna speak for the council in this way. It was something that was actively discussed, is something that we are actively considering. I'm not going to commit to a position one way or the other because we haven't voted as a council or had a discussion amongst certainly a plurality of the members saying that we are at this one position or that one position. So the answer is, we're interested.
When the Charter Revision Commission makes its, I guess this will be the final, hopefully final, recommendation to the council. Do we recommend a separate item, or is that solely at the discretion of the council?
It's
in our
discretion of the council.
Okay.
Commissions sometimes make recommendations, but the judgment, they're the appointing authority. The political judgment is made by the appointing authority. They have to make the determination what the voters will.
And the council comes up with the ballot.
The ballot questions. Yeah, I will work with the council.
Okay. That's helpful.
So I guess that could be maybe the same time. They'll be working, excuse me, with Steve on the language and then perhaps how things should be split up. But I do agree that that would be a good one. Any other questions or Mr. Sealand? I'm sorry, it's Jim.
I'm
and
not sure,
then-
and that was just wondering if, in regards to the 4-year term, if it's presented to you as coterminous with the mayor or not, I think that would make a difference in the council's favorability of it, like a yea or nay. It's just the temperature.
I think the council is unanimous on the fact that 4-year terms are necessary for the functioning of the city. I don't think we reached any kind of unanimity on the stagger, which is why it came to you sort of with that. And so I can't speak for others, but I do think that the 4-year term, there is strong support for. And so I think if you want to continue talking to the council about how to best implement that, I think everyone's open to that conversation. I also will note to your conversation, Mr. Levin, again, as Josh said, we can't take any position on it. We've not taken a vote. But if you listen to the debates, I think you can get a pretty good sense of where people on the council come out on the separate question issue. And I think it would probably give you comfort. So it was talked about quite a bit.
All right, thank you.
Jen, do you have any other questions?
I do not.
Doug? Anything before we wrap up? Doug's pre-muted. I will thank you all so much, and you're more than welcome to join us tomorrow. It'd be great to have as many people as we can to hear some more perspectives as we try to figure out the details. And then so structurally, Steve, we will have tomorrow to discuss. Will we also be doing that on the 5th? Or would the 5th need to be that this is the wrap up?
If we have no dates after the 5th, we have to finish by the 5th.
Okay, so that's gonna be the last one.
Yeah,
Yep.
It's really too bad we can't get one more meeting in after that, but we'll
Of course we can.
well, there's a lot of people who are unavailable. It's August.
Yeah, and I have to double check to make sure we have a quorum tomorrow.
We got a workshop. Right, but that puts a much more burden on us
I know,
on the 5th.
I know. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Doug?
You don't have to second.
Oh, no, sorry, I thought you had a question. All right, thank you very much. Thank you guys again. I appreciate it.
See you, Doug.
I voted in favor.